All right, so now let's set up our compositing environment. So I'm going to now collapse everything and just have F10 open here, and let's go render result. And we should see this. So next, I'm going to go Shift F3 a couple times, and then we should be right here. Compositor. So just hit Shift F3 a couple times. You should be there. Go use nodes, and then now we should see something like this. Depending on how you like to work, if you go Control Shift left click, you get this viewer node, and what that does is if you go use backdrop, now we kind of have a live debugger within our compositor. So just based on your workflow, sometimes I like to see it down here, sometimes I like to see it up here. So for the sake of this, I'll just do it on both. Sometimes it gets a little distracting if you have it up here, but I'm just showing you two methods. Use whichever one you feel most comfortable with. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, if I remember correctly, is I'm just going to bring in a lens distortion to start with. And let's work off the compositor. It's going to get too confusing otherwise. It's going to disconnect both of those, connect both of those up. And then let's go 0.02, just a very low value. And are we seeing anything happen yet? I believe we are. Let's check real quick. Let's hit M. Yeah, we are seeing something. It's very slight. Next, I'm going to bring in a mix node. I'm going to mix that in with sunbeams. And we're going to take our image. I'm going to feed that. First, let's see what we got going on. Let's add that together. And let's increase this value. So we have that on add. Maybe let's make this much, much lower. 0.2, 0.05. So I'm using 0.05 so we can see it affecting our particles up here, but not our stars too much. I don't want it to get too crazy. Let's bring in a hue saturation and kind of want it to be a little bit more red. All right, it's a little punchier. Let's go maybe 1.1 on the saturation. Then let's bring in another lens distortion and distort it. So now it kind of looks like we're flying through space. And then if I go to my sunbeams, I could kind of play with the position of where I want the effect to come in from. So I just kind of increase the value here. All right. So now we got something looking like so. I'm just going to get rid of the backdrop. Apologies. All right. So from there, let's go ahead and do a little bit of a vignette. Go mix. We're going to multiply. Going to bring in a ellipse mask. And I'm just going to quickly bring in my backdrop. Actually, it is quite beneficial. My bad. And we kind of need to just play with the width and the height. It's actually bring this into here and debug it from here. And let's move it back like that. All right. We're going to blur this to all hell. I'm just going to debug the blur. We're going to go Gaussian, fast Gaussian. Let's go relative. And let's go like 30%. So this is pretty much just darkening the corners for us, which is what we want. I don't want to play with the Y position. I want to play with the height. Bring that in. Bring this one in a little bit too. Go back to our multiply. Now that's really going to darken the corners. So if I hit M on this, we're going to see the effect. So it's doing a lot of darkening, so we don't want it to be that dark. So let's lower the fact. Let's go like maybe 0.3. And I'm just going to hit M, M. And essentially what a vignette does is it just kind of brings focus to the center of what we have in our image, and we want people to more so be focused on the particles in the sphere, so we're just going to add a little bit of vignette. And I'm just going to get rid of the backdrop again so we can see what we're doing. Maybe let's bring in a RGB curves. And let's bring some contrast in here. Make it a little punchier. We're just doing a very slight S-curve. So you can see it got a little bit more intense here where we have our emissions. And let's bring in some color balance. And we can make, see what we got here. So it's pretty much lift, gamma, gain. That is lows, mids, and highs. So that's like shadows, mid color ranges, and very bright color ranges. So we could bring a little bit of blue into what we got going here, just a little bit. Now these values are very sensitive, so you want to kind of have a light hand while you play with these. I don't want to touch the mids too much, and maybe let's try bring in some pink to that. It looks pretty cool. It's definitely looking a little bit more retro, funkish. Yeah, I like that. All right, I could roll with that. Next, let's bring in a filter. And these are pretty interesting. So have a look and maybe find something that you find piques your fancy. Usually Sobel, Pruitt, or Kirsch has some very interesting results. They're kind of all very similar, so let's go with maybe Sobel. Just use a very, very low value. But that's not doing too much for me, to be honest. That's kind of interesting. Well, that's something we could revisit after, to be honest. It's not really doing too much for me at the moment. All right, now the next part is really the part of sauce, and I got to tip my hat off to your boy Midge here. This is where we pretty much take a single value. Let me just close down my Slack real quick. This is pretty much where you take a single value and we are going to distort it. And in this case, we can pretty much choose whichever one we want. We could pick either reds, greens, blues, or alpha values, but we're not really going to be concerned with that one. And we're going to shift it. So I think for the colors that we have in this scene, either it's going to be reds or blues. We don't have too many greens in here. So pick either one of those values, and whatever color you picked, kind of keep that in mind All right, so we're going to need a displace, and we're going to need a texture to kind of drive the movement of what we're doing. So here, what we're going to need to do is I'm going to hit Shift-3 a couple more times. And actually, I don't want that one. I want the texture node editor, I believe. And we're going to go brush, we're going to go new, and we're going to create this one, call it brick, use nodes. It's going to come in as checkers. We don't want that. We want brick, bricks. So if I connect those up, I still don't see anything, so it's very difficult to kind of know what we have going. So if I come here and Control Shift click and bring in another viewer and go backdrop, we should see our brick texture. We go to colors. So now from here, we could kind of debug it. So let's make that black. Let's make this one white. So now we should have pretty much a gradient from dark to bright colors, and our thickness, I believe we need to bring this all the way down. And our bias kind of plays with our values. So -0.1, what do we got? Something a little bit darker. All right, let's roll with that. Then let's bring in another texture, and we're going to feed that into the same exact thing. And we could play with the scale if we want. Let's bring in a color ramp. So if we play with the scale, it's going to do exactly what you think. Could either increase or decrease the size in one of the three axes. I don't think Z really does anything because this is 2D. Shouldn't really do anything. Yeah, which it doesn't. So pretty much you're only going to be concerned with X and Y if you wanted to play with the scale, but we're kind of already doing that by feeding this texture into that texture, so we don't really need to play with it. And what we can do later is we can actually animate the offset. And that's exactly what I did for what I had in part 1 when I showed you guys the original animation. So completely from here, we could go #frame, and that would essentially move the offset of this in the X direction by every frame. So you see here, it already inputted the value 1096. Obviously, we don't want that type of movement. It's way too fast. So typically what you do is go #frame divided by a certain value. And this is just a really basic driver, and it's pretty much just an automation. So it's a value that will automatically increment itself over time throughout your time frame. All right, we have the color ramp. We're just going to squash the values a bit. And then what we could also do is bring in a math node, and we can multiply that to increase the values. That's obviously too harsh, but we're probably going to be tweaking these values anyways. And then we're going to blur it. Search, blur, do fast Gaussian, relative, 0.25, a very slight blur. And then let's find our displace. And let's connect this up to our displace. I'm just going to move these to be a little bit better aligned. We actually want the R input for our image, and that is going to be the output, and we're just going to shift this in the X direction. So now if we have a look, let's see what we have going on. It looks like we have nothing going on. But if I come in here and let's increase the value, see if we can get some movement going. Aha, now we do. So as you can see, the stars have essentially separated. So now we could also play with the channel that we're displaying. So let's see what happens if we plug in blue. Let's reconnect the red. And let's plug in the blue here. So now we've done the same thing for the blues. I mean, either looks cool, but I think red does look quite a bit better. So I'm going to stick with red. And let's just connect that back up. And now it's gone all cross-eyed. So I'm just going to reconnect everything completely. Boom, boom, boom. Alpha to there. Cool. Now we have this really distorted, cool effect going on. And this is something I think definitely should drive. So if I were to do my animation again, I'm just going to go #frame. And a good rule of thumb is to just divide it by your current frame rate. So if you're in 24, 30, or 60, you can divide it by one of those. But I'm going to go, yeah, divided by 24. Frame divided by 24. So we're just going to stick with that. All right. Cool. So another thing we're going to do, and it is pretty much the last step, is pretty much put some scan lines that we're going to have running across. The screen it's set up almost very similarly to how we did the distortion and displacement of a single value here. So let's go back down to our brush and let's create a new one. And this is called Brick01. I'm going to call this scan line. And let's delete the bricks. Let's go search and let's go blend. And let's hook that up. Let's go back to our compositor, search, let's go texture. And let's bring in our scan line and Control-Shift-click that so we can actually see it as a debug and vertical. And let's go color ramp. And sorry, we want to go color, not value. So we have something like that, and let's bring in another value. Let's make this one white, and let's make this one black. So we kind of have a sandwich going here. And now let's bring in another color ramp. And let us crunch these values. Get something intense like that. If that's too intense, let's go with B-spline. Crunch those in a little bit more. We could try something else. Maybe if we don't like B-spline, we could go with no linear ease. Let's go with B-spline. It's kind of nice and it's got a nice transition to it. So the next thing we're going to do is scale this. I'm going to scale this to be something quite a bit smaller, 0.005. So it's a very fine line. Cool. And let's do relative. That's fine. B-spline. And now we pretty much need to find a way now to just have this being duplicated everywhere. And we actually also need to move it. So let's go translate. So if we play with the Y value, that's essentially the movement we want. And I'm also just going to set this up with a driver frame, divide that by 24. All right. And we want to wrap this both axes. There we go. All right. Let's go mix. Let's bring that over here to our compositor. We don't really need to see this viewer anymore. And what we want to do is we want to burn it. And let's see what we have going. Boom. That's really crazy. So let's reduce the fact on that. And that really does add that retro, old TV kind of effect to what you got going on. Let's go 0.1. 0.1's pretty cool. And maybe now let's see if we can play with the filter. And I don't want this viewer anymore. And let's go F10 here to view it in our UV editor space. Soften. Now if we go Pruitt, that looks insane. Maybe go 0.1. Doesn't really look like anything happened. It adds a little bit of punch actually. So it does give it a little bit of punch. So maybe let's go to like 0.2. Maybe that's a little bit too much. Let's go 0.125. All right, guys, I really actually like the composition of this new Temple of Funk edition that we have. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a render, and then I will be back, and we're going to close off the video. All right, guys, I'll see you in a bit. All right, thank you guys so much for taking part in this tutorial. I'm happy for you if you made it this far and learned something. As always, I'd love to see what you guys make, so please hit me up on Instagram and show me what you guys got going on, and I'll be sure to repost it and shower you guys with some praise. So you can find me at Custom Julius. I'll have a link for you guys on the description somewhere. Also be sure to check out my guy 40K here. He makes dope beats and he's always releasing fresh content on his IG and his YouTube channel. Some of it being tutorials, so if you want to learn something about beat making, be sure to check him out too. And of course, if you guys found this content helpful, please like and subscribe and keep watching because I'm going to be trying to come up with some new, cool, interesting ideas for you guys. All right, much love. Until next time, steady up.